What happened in 2013? NVIDIA launched GTX 780. That's the first mover. What did AMD respond with as the fast second? R9 290X. So this was faster than this. It's straight up won. But AMD held the performance crown for like a total of 1 month or something, maybe like a month and a half, because then NVIDIA like countered with this. See, so basically NVIDIA was able to keep AMD out of the spotlight because they were able to hold the performance crown again, right? So, and they did this on like an AMD year. So then we have 2014, which is, remember what I told you guys, odd years are AMD years, even years are NVIDIA years. So just to kind of paint this picture even further, so remember what I said, odd years are AMD years, even years are NVIDIA years. Because what happened in 2011? HD 7970, the fastest GPU, and it was the king for like a total of like 3 or 4 months. And then what happened in 2012? GTX 680 took back the performance crown. This is the rare instance in history where AMD, so NVIDIA went first mover because this is their year, 2012. But what did AMD do? AMD actually countered them with HD 7970 gigahertz edition. I remember they were advertising this as the Tahiti's half birthday. They were celebrating this in like the summer of 2012, if anybody remembers that. Because if you guys watch my GPU collection video, I actually have a 7970 gigahertz edition. It's the Asus Matrix Platinum, and that was a very good overclocker card. So this was the one time in history that I can think of where NVIDIA goes first mover and it's NVIDIA's turn, and then AMD like fires back and steals the performance crown from them. Because the 7000 series GPUs, a lot of people don't know this, but the 7000 series GPUs from AMD, I'm not talking about the current ones, I'm talking about the ones from a decade ago. Those were actually very successful graphics cards. AMD sold a ton of 7000 series GPUs. And then the very first Bitcoin and Litecoin cryptocurrency wave, it was known as the wave of 2014. That first crypto wave, a lot of these cards went to crypto during that time. So AMD sold a ton of like 7000 series GPUs. So, but in 2013, you know, this is AMD's turn. They go and launch 290X, but then, you know, NVIDIA takes the performance crown with the 780 Ti. So basically AMD did to NVIDIA what NVIDIA ended up doing for like a whole decade, essentially. So NVIDIA launches GTX 980 and GTX 970 in 2014, and the 970 in particular was very, very successful. This is probably one of NVIDIA's most successful GPUs ever, alongside the old 8800 GT. So from like 2007. So you know, 7 years later, they have like another huge bestseller with the GTX 970. So, and the reason why this was so popular was because the retail price was, well, the official MSRP was $329 for a 70 series card. Well, realistically, it sold more for like $379. That was the more realistic price. It was NVIDIA's turn, but AMD had no response. AMD literally had no response. NVIDIA gained so much market share on the success of the GTX 970. So what happened in 2015? It's AMD's turn. R9 Fury X, R9 Fury, and the R9 300 series. So, but the problem was the 300 series was mostly, well, not mostly, but it was partially a rebrand of the 200 series, which had launched in 2013. So they had a rebrand of a rebrand because some of these GPUs were rebrands of 7000 series GPUs. So the reason why this was happening, the reason why rebrands were happening with AMD was because AMD was starved for cash. And we've talked about that in a previous live stream. But what happened in 2015? NVIDIA countered. NVIDIA went and did fast second on AMD's first mover with GTX 980 Ti. GTX 980 Ti came in and like stole the performance crown from the Fury X. Like very, very shortly after. Literally like, in fact, I think, yeah, if I remember correctly, the GTX 980 Ti actually launched in front of the Fury X. Like they literally went and like launched it before they even officially launched this product. So, which kind of really hurt this product. The other thing that hurt the Fury X though was it was a liquid cooled only, and you know some people don't run liquid cooled AIO GPUs in their system. So yeah, but the 980 Ti had a lot of like issues with the VRM, like basically burning up on it, and then the cards just die. Like this was probably one of the worst NVIDIA cards in terms of reliability. A ton of these died and had to be replaced under warranty, or out of warranty, and then it just kind of died or ended up in repair shops where someone had to resolder the entire thing. So basically, that was a 980 Ti. But see, well, the reason why I have these circled is because these are examples where NVIDIA went and did the second mover, the fast second, and it effectively like defeated AMD at their own party. Like this was AMD's turn, but NVIDIA ended up with the fastest GPU. This was AMD's turn, but NVIDIA still ended up with the fastest GPU. But when it was NVIDIA's turn to launch a new architecture, they were uncontested. So it's like, this was like the one time here where AMD actually went fast second and actually won. But the reality is like AMD's branding was never really strong compared to NVIDIA. So that's the reason why, like, even though they had the fastest GPU in 2012, very few people knew that or even cared. So then 2016 is the year it all like solidified in terms of NVIDIA's favor. So we had that GTX 1080 that year and GTX 1070 and GTX 1060 all in the same year. Because the reason why this launched, the whole reason why the 1060 launched when it did was because AMD launched RX 480. They launched RX 480 that year. So NVIDIA's like, no, you can't have your Spotlight. So that's why 1060 came out when it did. Because typically, because if you guys remember, the 960 launched in the beginning of, I think it was like March or February of 2015. So it was like several months after the launch of these two. These two launched and sat there because AMD literally had nothing. So it's like, okay, we can keep on. NVIDIA's doing their classic strategy of, okay, gamers who can't afford these, they just have to buy the old 600 and 700 series. Too bad. That's what they would do. So, but see, what I'm saying is in this year, NVIDIA's turn, no response. Free reign. Well, okay, there was a response here, but, you know, nothing like to get people to pay attention to them. So again, free reign, 2016. So then what happened in 2017? 2017, what you'll notice is that the timelines get longer and longer for AMD. So it's like, when was this? This was, okay, just to give you an example. This was November 2011. So basically, kind of like the 7900 XTX today, which launched in December. So this was November 2011, which means it was the end of the year, right? It was Q4, holiday season. This was the summer, but this is literally just a refresh. This was September. No, this was like August, September of 2013 was when they launched that. So it's like, okay, less than 2 years. Less than 2 years from this. Because this was November. This was September. So almost 2 years, but not quite. But then this was September. This was like June, July, like somewhere in there. So still within 2 years. But now we come to 2017. So what happened was, if you guys remember, AMD launches this. NVIDIA counters with 780 Ti, like a month or two after the 290X. Then in 2015, even before AMD launches this, 980 Ti like comes out before it by like a few weeks. Now 2017 happens, so this is a AMD year. This is an AMD year. But what's notable about 2017, besides the fact that Ryzen first gen launched, what was the GPU that launched right alongside Ryzen 1800, like the first generation of Ryzen? What's the GPU? Let's see if the chat knows the answer. What GPU launched in the exact same time as Ryzen in 2017? So the correct answer is Joel with the GTX 1080 Ti. This is the correct answer, and a lot of people are going to be shocked because it's like, okay, the 1080 Ti is as old as Zen 1. So there were a lot of people at Micro Center that were there to get either the full system upgrade, meaning they're going to go Zen 1, aka Ryzen 7 1800X, or the Ryzen 7 1700 or whatever, and they're going to pair it up with one of those. So it's crazy. Like, it's insane, like how NVIDIA and AMD together were literally combining their forces together. Ryzen plus Geforce. So 1080 Ti. But this is an AMD year. This is an AMD year. Because remember what I said? Odd years are AMD years. So AMD, later on in the summer, came RX Vega 64 and RX Vega 56. But obviously, NVIDIA doesn't need to do anything, because when these launched, this was March. These were like August when these things came out. Like, that's a long gap in the year between those two. And these, you guys remember, these things competed with the 1080 and the 1070 from the previous year. AMD year, but guess who had the fastest GPU in an AMD year? There it is, GTX 1080 Ti. And it launched so much further in advance than Vega that it was like, Vega was basically DOA that whole year. But AMD still ended up selling a ton of Vega because of what? So remember what I said earlier, I alluded to something that happened in this year. So in 2014, I guess I'll leave this on the chart. It was the very first cryptocurrency wave. It was the wave of 2014. It was the days of Bitcoin and Litecoin. That was when that happened. So then we come to 2018, but actually there was something that was happening in 2017, which was the second crypto wave. So then the crypto wave number 2 came, and a lot of people remember this wave because it was the first Ethereum wave. The first crypto wave was mostly Bitcoin and Litecoin. And then ASICs came out, and then people, like, ASICs showed up around here, and then you didn't need, like, GPUs for mining anymore. But back in the day, most people who were mining Bitcoin and Litecoin, especially Litecoin, were using HD 7000 series cards or R9 200 series cards, or in the case of the rebrand, R9 300 series cards. These were the cards that went to the mining population. So the reason why there was never really a problem for gamers in the first crypto wave was because gamers were too busy buying GTX 970 and then GTX 960, and you can ask anybody who was involved in the very first crypto wave, and all of them were buying AMD Radeon graphics cards for mining. So you had two demographics buying GPUs. You had Team Red GPUs going to mining, and you had Team Green GPUs going to gaming. So you did not see a problem with buying graphics cards during that era because the mining people were getting all their cards from AMD, and the gamers were getting their cards mostly from NVIDIA. So that is the reason why during this first era, I think most people probably have seen that whole like market share chart where it shows, like NVIDIA and AMD's like market share gain. Like NVIDIA's up there and then AMD's like, kind of like here, and then it just becomes like that. You guys remember that chart? If anybody knows what I'm talking about, like that's what it is. So basically this whole thing started happening where it goes up for NVIDIA to like 80% and, down to like 20% for AMD, because we're measuring the gaming market. And what did I just say? In 2014, during the first crypto wave, all the AMD cards were fulfilling the Litecoin and altcoins and Bitcoin mining craze. So that's where they mostly went to. So fast forward to the second crypto wave of 2017, and we had the exact same scenario play out. People were mining on 300 series. People were mining on RX 470, RX 480, RX 570, RX 580, and, believe it or not, GTX 1070. These were the cards of choice in the second crypto wave. And the reason why the GTX 1070 is on this list is because, just like these cards, it had 8 gigabytes of GDDR5, I think 5 or 6, I think it was 5. Yeah, GDDR5. This is all GDDR5 memory, and this was the stuff. This was the stuff that you had to have to mine crypto efficiently. So 1070 was like the best NVIDIA card for mining, but it was way more expensive than the AMD equivalents. So the AMD equivalents, once again, sold out in droves for the mining of Ethereum. I remember going to Fry's Electronics, back when Fry's Electronics was still around, going into the store, and I remember there was somebody in front of me asking the sales guy. I remember hearing the phrase, "Do you guys have any RX 570s in stock?" And I immediately knew that the fact that he was saying it like it was plural, kind of like he wanted to buy more than one, I immediately knew that guy is trying to do Ethereum mining on the RX 570. The RX 570 by far was the most popular GPU in 2017 for Ethereum mining. So yeah, this is the reason why. So during this time, once again, you had gamers buying NVIDIA, and you had mining people buying AMD. So that is the reason why there was never really a serious problem with people trying to get a GPU, because there was a balance. So in 2018, we know this is an NVIDIA year. Everybody knows what launched in 2018. The more you buy, the more you save. RTX 2080 Ti and 2080. This is how you know, and 2070. This is how you know NVIDIA was not that confident in their product, because this was one of the few times in NVIDIA's company history where they actually launched a TI variant at the same time as the introduction of their new architecture. This is what is a unique thing about the 20 series, which is also very telling of how bad that generation was. So the fact that they launched the TI together at the same time as the 2080 proved that it was not really anything to write home about. So that was an NVIDIA year, and once again, there was no response from AMD. So then we come to 2019, and this was the last year before everybody knows what happened with the malware scenario. This was like the end of a decade here. But this was an AMD year, and what did we get? Letdowns like Radeon 7 on February 7th. They tried to do like some funny marketing, like February 7th, Radeon 7, but it just, okay, it's like that didn't work. So then in the summer, they did July 7th. They did, of 2019, was Ryzen 9 3900X. The first Ryzen 9, they launched X570 which introduced PCI Gen 4 for the very first time. And so, okay, this was Zen 2, and the very first PCI Gen 4 graphics cards, the 5700 XT and the 5700. So this was like the big turning point for AMD. Not so much that Radeon 7, but this stuff was what was like a big deal, because this was the first time where we got a CPU that was more than 8 cores on the consumer desktop platform. Later on that year, they did launch the 3950X, but this was like toward the end of the year. This was like, I think, November or something. But this was like all on July 7, 2019. All this stuff showed up. And so PCI Gen 4 is not new, right? Like 2019. But this was the only platform that could do Gen 4. And this was in 2019. So this was probably one of AMD's more, I guess, successful years. But the reality was it was more so successful on the CPU side and less so on the GPU side. What's unique about this year is this is the year that NVIDIA didn't actually do anything in terms of trying to like steal the thunder from AMD, because I feel like at this point in time, NVIDIA had gotten to a point where they're now in their own world and they no longer really think too much about what AMD does when it comes to the graphics cards. So this is where they, because you guys remember, they introduced ray tracing even though no one really cared. Remember the whole 10 gigaраys? I love gigaраys. Remember that whole meme? The more you buy, the more you save, and the gigaраys, the 10 gigaраys. That was 2018. That was when NVIDIA, like, their image kind of changed, and they went from being like this gamer-oriented company to really trying to push into AI and these other sort of like key differentiating features that are based off of machine learning. So like the tensor cores and all the other stuff. Then we come to 2020. We all know what happened that year. This is the year where everything just fell apart. But this is an NVIDIA year. RTX 3090, even though it launched after this one. So we're going to put it in this order, RTX. But here's where things get really weird. I'm just going to remove 3070 just so that it doesn't look so messy. But here is where things got really weird. Because for the first time in history, AMD goes and launches. They try to make a concentrated effort to crash NVIDIA's party. This was like the first time, like the last time AMD did this. Now, granted, ultimately the 3090, the 8K gaming graphics card, as NVIDIA called it, was still like the fastest one. But at $1,500, at that point in time, the general public largely ignored it, kind of like a Titan, because it's $1,500. So it's like, who's gonna waste $1,500 on a graphics card, right? Unless you're unless you're gonna use it for like production or something. So 2020 was a dark. Yeah, this was the start of what's known in PC gaming history as the dark. Well, not just PC gaming, also console gaming. This is known as the dark times. This was also the year that Zen 3 launched. Zen 3 launched, aka Ryzen 5000 series, launched in the dark times. So that's when we got like basically this. So the reason why I'm pointing these out is because this was the first time AMD tied Intel. So basically, what do I mean by that? Ryzen 7 3800X equals i7 9900K. These CPUs were pretty much identical in performance. So why is it significant? Because this is the first time in like 13 years that AMD finally managed to tie Intel. But so it got them on the radar. And that's the reason why there's a ton of people with, you know, the Ryzen 5 3600. Because it put AMD on the radar, and now it's like they're actually equal to Intel. Why is Zen 3 such a big deal? Because Zen 3 was the first time that AMD actually beat Intel in the CPU space. Like, this was the first time that AMD's x86 architecture was actually better than Intel in every metric measurable. So this was like the home run win that they finally got after like, what, the last time AMD was faster than Intel objectively was prior to 2006. So we're talking like AMD 64 Athlon days. My very first PC, for example, was like the time when AMD was at the top of the game. So anyway, we all know what happened here. And now to make things worse for everybody, the stars aligned during the dark times, and it also signified the start of the third crypto wave, which, unlike the previous crypto waves, actually lasted significantly longer than prior to, which is what really made it the dark times. The crypto craze, we had the human malware, and to top it off, we had the supply chain shortages. So that's a pretty terrible time to be in the computer hardware space. Despite an era where we had some of the best competition across the board in terms of computing. Because what did we get in 2021? This is an AMD year. What did we get? We got like nothing. We got 3080 Ti for $1,200. Oh, like 6700 XT and the other Radeon stuff, this and this. But it's like, okay, these are really like, so this is an AMD year. They basically did what they did like back in 2011. Seems like that was like, what, 10 years? That's like 10 years ago. Wow. Oh no, like almost 9 years. Well, I mean, so it's like, it's weird because 2020 was a bad year, but 2021 was actually probably a worse year, honestly. Like this was probably the peak. This was the pinnacle of the dark times, 2021. What else? Okay, let me ask the chat. What else launched in 2020 alongside the 6800 XT? And the 6800. There was two other products that AMD had developed the hardware for. Yes, the answer is the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and the S. This is the reason why, in my mind, 2020 was like the most crazy jam-packed year ever for like any sort of like gaming related hardware. Because you basically got Zen 3, you got the fastest gaming CPU platform, which was so energy efficient, and you got, you know, like all this new hardware from NVIDIA, all this new hardware from AMD. I mean, even in the consoles, you got a whole new console generation. So 2020, even though it was the first year of the dark times, it was like one of the biggest years. All those products all launched in November of 2020. They all dropped like literally within a 2-week time frame of each other. Year of the scalpers. Yeah, this was the year where you had to like this is such a weird year because this was the year where you had the John Travolta meme streams show up that would like live stream for literally infinity, and then you had like people like you had to watch people like Jake Randall, like of all the like things, like literally people started YouTube channels to showcase drops and to help people buy PlayStation 5s. It was such a weird time because you couldn't go anywhere. You know, everyone was on lockdown mostly. Like no one was traveling for work, or very few people were. And then like you were stuck in your house or your apartment. So 2021 was the big like invisible blur of a year that people just kind of forget that it was there. And then we got 2022, which was obviously last year. Last year, we all know what happened. We got RTX. Well, first we got Zen 4, then we got RTX 4090 and ARC, and so things were like on the way up. Like things were looking more positive in 2022 compared to 2020. So 2020 was like entering into the dark times. 22 was exiting the dark times. But the problem, and I've complained about this with people at Micro Center, like whenever I shop there, like my complaint with product like PC enthusiast hardware is like, why is it all crammed into like a 90-day window? Like everything is getting launched in a 90-day window. So it's very, very hard for the average consumer to budget for these sort of products. Like it's insanely hard now when you cram everything into the end of the year. And considering it's also the holiday season when, you know, you got to be doing like holiday shopping for family members and stuff. And it's like now they're going to go and throw all this other hardware at me. So it's just a huge mess. So because we had what? End of September was Zen 4. Then October were these two and 13th gen. And then we had RTX 4080 was literally like by itself in November. And then December was RX 7900 XTX and XT. So it's like all the stuff once again got crammed into like a 90-day window, and it's like, why is this a thing now? It's like ever since 2020, AMD's like, you know what? We're not gonna follow this stupid leapfrog, odd years or my years, even years or your years. And now it's like AMD's like, okay, you know what? We're just gonna like launch our stuff like right alongside. I don't know why they do that. I don't think that's a good thing. They should probably stagger their launches away from NVIDIA. But I guess the reason why AMD's doing this is because it's like, okay, if they're going to try to crash the party, you can't do it because we came to your party too. See, that's the only way I can see them doing that. I'm trying to remember, why did we talk about all these GPU timelines again? What was the original reason for this? I don't even remember. Like, we were talking about something in like Hogwarts Legacy, and then it gives fanboys from both camps something to chat about, I guess.